I'm Dan Levinson. The book is published by Zev Levinson, my middle name. The book. Okay, Song of Six Rivers. It is an epic length poem. I'm not sure you can call it an epic poem by the true definition of an epic, but it's a long poem, and it's pretty much an ode to Humboldt County, ode to our area, or rather the Six Rivers region, Humboldt Bay region. And it tells some of my own stories, some of my own personal journey, and it's about loss and mortality and why we're all here, really. And I wrote it when I was creeping towards 50 years old, and wondering what my legacy would be, when I'm gone. And I can get more into that later if you want. And it's accompanied on every page by mostly archival photos from here, from Humboldt State University, from the library, the special collections, apparently mostly that the public hadn't seen. So it's a very visual book, and that's the book in a nutshell, really.
Now, what is your background? How did you get into poetry? Do you have a background in writing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did all my degrees in literature, and I have an MFA in creative writing focusing on poetry from the University of North Carolina in Greensboro, and studied literature at UC Santa Cruz and here, and the teaching of writing. So yeah, it's been my whole life, really. And now what I've been doing for more than 20 years is I'm with California Poets in the schools, and what I do most every week of the school year is teach poetry in one school or another, constantly moving from school to school. So I've been lucky enough to stay steeped in poetry, and I didn't know I would write such a long poem that would turn into a book, but that was kind of the goal when I started working on it. On this particular project, I wanted something meaningful that would last, and that's where it came from.
Now, how did you end up in Humboldt County?
Mm-hmm. Well, my older brother had briefly gone to Humboldt State, and that probably opened the door a little bit for me. And then when I was at UC Santa Cruz, or shortly thereafter probably, it was after that, I applied here. I loved the area, of course, and moved up here, and I was in the MA in literature, and moved away for the MFA, in North Carolina, and thought I don't know if I was never coming back, but I thought I was on the PhD track, and that didn't happen. I ended up back here, and my job at the time, a self-created job, was being the flower man, Dan the flower man, selling flowers in Arcata and Eureka. I was mobile with a big blue tricycle, and so I dressed very colorfully. And so I just came back and never wanted to leave.
Now, what are the aspects of Humboldt County that you wanted to get across in your book? Is it the geography or like the culture? What is it that about this area, this region, that strikes you?
Yeah, both, for sure. Definitely the geography, the geology, the botany. Everybody knows what a beautiful place it is. It's really special. It's, people compare the coast here maybe to Big Sur in California, and so, and there aren't a whole lot of people here, and that's a plus for somebody like me who doesn't want to deal with the big city noise, traffic. And I love the community here, the culture here. Being the flower man really connected me with a lot of people, and some people still see me around and they go, "Oh, hey, I remember you from those days." And of course we have a really special, tight-knit community where we all see each other all the time. You run into the same people in the grocery store all the time or wherever. And it's a community that is very supportive of the arts, and I don't know if I could get away with what I'm doing, teaching poetry in schools somewhere else. I have colleagues in my organization who do it in San Diego, so it can be pulled off, but school after school after school is sinking money into what I do every year, and so that speaks to me as to what sort of community is a community that much that values poetry, values the arts in general.
Now, what in your book, what is it that you want the audience, what do you want to communicate to your audience through your poetry? Like, what was your initial idea going in, and did that change as you were writing?
Yeah, I wanted to communicate that we all have some sort of purpose, and I did also want to communicate the magic of this place, and I think I succeeded in that. I didn't quite know where the poem was going when I started it. I'm part of the Lost Coast Writers Retreat, and that takes place every summer at Camp Mattole, and between Petrolia and Honeydew. And each summer a group of us goes out there, we rent the place, and we work on each other's writing. And so I began the book out there one summer, thinking I was pretty sure it was going to be a long piece. A few years before I started it, one of our members, the retreat has a bit of a history where it began through the Redwood Writing Project, which is part of the National Writing Project. So it was really a teacherly retreat, and it still is largely so, but it's no longer officially part of the Redwood Writing Project. Funds dried up for grants to make that happen, and it morphed, and a bunch of us turned it into our own retreat and called it the Lost Coast Writers Retreat. And one of those founding members was Guy Kuttner, who was a local educator. He taught at Pacific Union School, he taught at College of the Redwoods, he was a peace activist, he was an environmentalist, and he passed away pretty suddenly one year. It was, I think, 9 years ago now. And he was, I think, 64 years old, and he had a rare condition which just knocked him down, and he died. And but he had this very strong, pretty gregarious personality. Really happy guy, really positive, wanted to change everything for the better. People in our community who I run into who knew him still talk about him in the same way, like, oh, he taught my kid and it made such a difference. And my little slip there about who know him is funny because his presence was so strong to me that I still think he's around. He's one of those rare cases where, there were hundreds of people at his memorial. He really touched a lot of people. So I think I wanted to weave him into the poem, and the poem ended up he was very much part of the poem. He's the muse of the poem. So in the poem, I'm asking myself, what am I doing here? What's my legacy going to be? And this ties in with my father's early death, who, when I was only 14, my dad died, and he left a really strong legacy behind. So that's always been part of me, what do we leave behind? And so in my poem, I'm wondering this, and Guy starts talking to me from the beyond, and he's telling me, well, you need to stop worrying about that, and what you need to do is you need to sing of this land that we both know and love. That's it. And you've been teaching in the schools, you've gotten to know the geography really well, and so I did. And so the rest of the poem is me basically singing about our area, and it's been described to me perhaps as being in a plane and flying over Humboldt, and every so often it dips down and you get a real close-up of Arcata, let's say, or somewhere else. And my work in the schools is what's gotten me to know the area so well. Because I think 2 weeks ago I stayed out in Whitethorn for a week, and I was mentioning that the week before I was at McKinleyville Middle School, and some people were saying, where are you next week? Whitethorn. And they were like, where's that? So I've gotten to know all these different areas of Humboldt by being able to stay for a week in Whitethorn and Bryceland, and sometimes up in Del Norte County and Siskiyou County, and sometimes other counties as well, mostly Humboldt. What we would consider pretty far-flung places. And I'm usually in somebody's house where I'm given my own studio, and I'm offered to join people for dinner, and I take walks every day, and I go, where should I go check this thing out? And so I get to see all sorts of aspects that a lot of other locals really don't see. And I was just talking yesterday with a neighbor. I ran into a neighbor on a walk, and I mentioned, oh, have you seen the black pig on the other side of the fence? And no. And we started talking about the most interesting sightings we've had in Humboldt. And I said, the most interesting one for me is probably the bighorn sheep. You know, and my hosts, I was staying with my hosts in a place called Fort Seward, and they had directed me to go to some giant rock, you know, where they have picnics or something, and I got lost. I didn't find their rock. I found another rock, and I was down in some valley and saw these creatures and didn't know what they were, and I photographed them, and I showed we put the photos on the computer and showed them to my hosts, and they were pretty shocked, you know, like, we've been here forever, you know. So all these things are just tying together in my book, and, you know, and my father is woven in there a little bit as well.
I like to go into the writing process. Mm-hmm. You personally, are you someone that likes to get up at a certain time and then make it regimented, like you go for a walk at 8 a.m. and think about what you're going to write, or is your process a bit more kind of eclectic, like you go with inspiration when you get it?
Yeah. Well, I think I do have some regimens, but not as far as waking up and writing goes. I kind of wish I did. When I was younger, definitely I would wait for inspiration for the poems to come. And the older you get and the less time you have, you go, oh, you know, shouldn't wait around waiting for inspiration to strike. You know, I've heard in the interview, I remember on the radio with Paul Simon, you know, about his next album, whatever that was, and he said, no, I don't wait around waiting for inspiration to strike. You know, he's a hard worker. So sometimes I'll have a topic and I will make myself work on it for poems. I do think my best poetry is through pure inspiration when I'm lucky enough for that to come. And with a project like this, which is, you know, the poem is maybe 528 lines long, and I'm working on a much longer one now, it's very hard for me to get back to that if I only have a few hours. Especially the one I'm working on now, it's so long that I need days at a time, and I rarely have that, so it sits all by itself, you know, in my notebook or on the computer sometimes for months at a time, and that makes me sad. And so, thus the retreats, you know, the Lost Coast Writers Retreat, once a year. Some of us go up to Bend and we stay at the founder's house of the retreat. The main founder was Bob Sizo, who used to co-direct the Redwood Writing Project. So, you know, we'll have days at a time and I can go, oh, that's what I wrote. What was I saying? You know, so, you know, and when I'm on a retreat, that sort of thing, yeah, I'm disciplined. You know, sure, I can work for hours at a time. And the retreats, too, are so fun because you're with people who have become as family, you're eating great food together, you're cooking together, going out, unless it's on the Lost Coast, you know, then you're just at Camp Atoll. So, yeah, and, you know, in the summer, I am able to do that as well at home. I'm able to give myself hours at a time, sometimes day after day. But I'm a freelancer, so I don't have that much free time in my day, and when I do, I'm scattered. Like Kyle Morgan here of HSU Press, he and I were just joking, you know, which school am I at this week? It's hard to keep track. You know, this week I'm at Washington Elementary in Eureka, and next week I'm at Morris Elementary in McKinleyville. The week after that I'm in Fieldbrook, and, you know, where am I now? And the book has become this huge freelance project as well, getting it out to different places, and I've ended up, rather accidentally, but it's worked, I've ended up sitting at tables at craft fairs and moving it, pitching it, because I can sit there at a table, and my partner Jen has her ceramics, and so she's selling her ceramics, and that's how I got involved with it, quite by accident. Hey, why don't you try your book too? And I've moved a lot of copies in the last year because of that. So sales were, you know, okay in the local bookstores and online, but you know, I can move those when I'm sitting there in local grocery stores, even whatever. So oh, and I'm an editor on the side, and so yeah, all the freelance work really makes it hard for me to, you know, have the time and sometimes even have a slow enough life to for that inspiration to strike. I think a lot of that is missing from my life now, just because I'm not, you know, I'm just not as calm and grounded as I used to be in some ways, just because of that scattered lifestyle, and I would like to slow down if I could.
I'd like to go in, what has your collaborative experience with HSU Press been with distributing your book and selling your book, finding an audience for it?
Yeah, well, HSU Press has been great. It's been lucky for me, a really good partnership. It's a fairly new press, really, and you know, I happened to pitch the book to Kyle. Kyle happened to say, "Oh, I see this maybe as a visual project," and he was thinking of the historic photos, and I was really naive about it, and I thought, yeah, I guess, but it's because it's a visual book. Is why people will buy it without having really read a word. They'll go, "Oh, this is a really nice tribute to our area, whether I like the poetry or not." And so Kyle was right on, and then Cindy Phillips, who goes by C.M. Phillips, she was the main designer for the book, and we had help with other people. Ashley Schumann helped out designing the book as well, and my partner Jen helped with some of the design, Jen Rand. But it was really through Cindy's constant hard work, generous, unpaid work. She was volunteering to try to get her skills up to speed. She started her own press called Sequoia Song Publications, and in fact we just made a new hardcover version of the book, which is co-published by Humboldt State University Press and Sequoia Song Publications. So that's just coming out now. And so HSU Press has helped me get it out a bit in the online world, but mostly left it up to me to push it into bookstores and things like that, and I was fine with that. And I have, you know, I've besides local bookstores taking it generously, and places like pharmacies and grocery stores where it sits on the shelves and people pick it up. Because the book is available through Ingram, which is the largest book distributor in the U.S., I believe, bookstores can order it directly as well, which they couldn't otherwise, or they could through Amazon, but they don't want to, or they're, you know, they're not going to they're not going to get their discount that they need. And so I've gone county through California, calling bookstores, and I hit the wall last summer, and I was moving to a new location, and I stopped. But I think I contacted more than half the bookstores in California, and got my book into a lot of them, and a little bit into other places like Powell's Bookstore, in Portland. So the collaboration with HSU Press has been wonderful for sure, and we did have a nice launch here at Humboldt State University. We had an event, which was great, and you know, we had nice flyers made up and all of that. Amanda Ulster, who works here in the library, she made this great flyer. Oh, and we were on the radio, so all those good things. And also I have a lot of history with Humboldt State myself. You know, I was a student here. I did some teaching here in the English department. So it was really nice. It sort of felt kind of like a homecoming in some ways. I'm still here with the Redwood Writing Project. I teach the Young Writers program every year. I teach poetry to the kids, Young Writers Camp, things like that. So very much full circle. I was friends with Marvin Trump, who designed this building that we're sitting in, who passed away, I believe it was last year. I went to UC Santa Cruz with his kids. So it's just been pure collaboration, community effort, all of that.
How would you describe the reception of your book? And is it different than what you expected?
Reception's been good. One puts out a book of poetry and, is anybody going to read this thing? Especially if it's a super long poem. And anyway, who reads poetry, right, these days? But people have said really positive things. I've done a number of readings where I'll read the whole poem or parts of it. And, some people occasionally, I don't know if it's fair to say when I'm lucky, but people are moved to tears because I do some explanation of the context for it, and some people who knew Guy, and just, or even if they didn't, if they know the area really well, they've been really moved. So I've gotten some really lovely reviews, and yeah, reception's been good. And again, in the first year I've sold about 500 copies, which I hear is pretty good for a book of poetry, and it's from a small press that is still new. So we're still working on that process. Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Now, you mentioned that the project you're working on after this is also long form.
Yeah.
Did this project kind of alter the length and how you write? Like, before this project, was most of your poetry much shorter?
Yeah, most of my poems, like most normal people, I guess if poets are at all normal, were a page or a few pages or something. Occasionally there would be a fairly long poem of a few pages, but no, nothing ever like this. And I didn't know I could do it. I just went for it, and it was part of that mindset of when I began the project. I want to do something meaningful that's going to last, and so I thought, all right, I can do this. I can do this epic thing, but I wrote it in a certain form, a certain stanza form, certain rhyme scheme. I was working with a certain sort of meter, and I shared it with Jim Dodge of here, our famous writer who has been teaching here for a long time. And he gave me a bunch of very useful criticism, and he's unsparing in his criticism, which is a really good thing. And I rewrote it. I was really disappointed after that meeting with him, in the sense of like, you write something that long and you think, wow, I created this amazing thing, and then I realized I had to rewrite it. And so I revised the rhyme scheme, I revised the stanza structure, I worked more on the meter of it, the rhythm. And so yeah, that has totally informed my new project. It has made me look at other very long poems. Historically, what have other poets done? Which of course I had read a lot of that, but I hadn't thought about it that carefully. I was just naive. And so am I going to keep writing super long poems? I don't know. I need to finish this one. I'm getting kind of close. This summer I'll wrap it up for sure, and or at least the first draft, and see where it goes from there.
Excellent. Now, is there anything else that's on your mind that you want to get out before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. I think we've really covered it. Again, I'm just grateful that it turned into a visual project, because with a new poem I'm working on, sure, I might get it picked up to be published as a book of a poem of over 1,000 lines, but it's complicated. You want people to just enjoy it for what you wrote itself, but now that it's this beautiful collaborative project, it's become this artistic project visually, it's made me want to keep doing that. And I don't know if I would always do it, but it's really made me, it opened me up, which I very much appreciate that. I owe that to Kyle, and I owe that to Cindy.